find out why. Let's go straight to the C-suite hiring manager and ask them, what is it that they're really looking for when they're hiring a senior person just like you? Can't wait to find out what they've got to say. And welcome everyone to the Executive Edge Show special guest interview. Today, we've got COO, C-suite, COO of Zedos, Alistair Hutchinson with us, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what the COO does when he's in the hiring chair. Alistair, for those who don't know what Zedos is and are not familiar with you, give us a quick introduction, please.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Johnny, and hi, everybody. My name's Alistair Hutchinson, and I help CEOs of startups, anything up to 500 headcount, generally in a regulated environment. And I take basically the risk and the cost element of the company and look after that for them, which frees the CEOs up to do what they should be doing, which is really setting the long-term vision and dealing with investors and so on. And in some companies, the CEOs take a lot of interest, obviously, in the revenue. So I look after everything else for them.
Great. When you say regulated environment, you mean financial services, yeah?
Yeah, that's my background, is financial services, heavily regulated. We're moving into, I'm currently at Zedos, which actually moves into the ad tech space as well. Yeah. Adverts obviously have their own regulators, a far lighter touch than FS. But again, there's a lot of commonality across it, just about how you do business as opposed to the underlying regulations themselves.
Cool. Zedos, I obviously know a little bit about Zedos because I've been tracking it for a while, but tell everybody, I think it's super cool, actually. So yeah, I'm going to allow you to free reign to completely big Zedos up because I think it's a super cool business. Go for it.
Cheers. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty special myself, although I might be slightly biased. So Zedos really is a fusion of fintech and ad tech. So there's a whole host of issues in the advertising industry, which I won't go into now. But what we do is take open banking information, which means we don't do any of the other tracking that advertisers do. Mm-hmm. And that actually is a better data set than advertisers currently have and allows us to really target people better. Now, that in itself is just a slight evolution of advertising. What's really groundbreaking, which makes it so different, is because we can target such a smaller cohort of people for what we think is a similar result for the advertisers. Mm. We can actually pass through some of our revenue to the consumers. So advertising in the UK, digital display advertising is a £6 billion industry. And none of that makes its way back to you as a consumer. It goes into the coffers of Facebook and Google and so on. And so we currently pass through 20% of our revenue back to people. So you are having far better targeting. Yeah. You are actually seeing some of the benefits of it. And we do it within an app rather than just hammering you wherever you go with adverts, which means you actually get to be advertised to when you want to be advertised to.
Okay, so basically, if you can target a smaller number of people, that costs less. And if you're getting the same result because the targeting is better, then there's some margin to be made there, and some of it gets back to the consumer, which
absolutely
will be pretty delightful for them. If they know they're going to be spending some money on something anyway, they may as well choose to be advertised to when they want to be advertised to and make a buck out of it.
Absolutely. So it's fairer for everyone.
I love it. So you're the COO, the Grand Fromage. And so typically, who works for you then? At Zedos particularly, what are the sort of big functional areas that report into you?
Yeah, so as I say, pretty much everything that isn't sales is my responsibility day to day. So that would be things like product, tech, legal, operations, including sort of payment operations and so on. Yeah. And that's a combination of headcount within Zedos, but we, as a fairly early stage company, we outsource a lot of that as well. So I'm dealing constantly with outsource service providers.
Cool. And I didn't hear finance in there. Is that a function that's outside of your remit?
No, I look after finance as well. We have a financial advisors who help us with that, so it probably takes up less of my time than the rest. But yeah, absolutely, responsibility for the financial forecasts and how that works in terms of the business strategy all falls down to myself as well.
Pretty heavy suite of functions: product, tech, ops, and finance. When you're looking at a tech business, fintech business, or an ad tech business. Okay, so look, you've got to hire some people to be heads of those functions, or if it's outsourced, you're going to be in charge of a relationship for a provider of that function until you insource it when you get bigger. Let's pick on one of those functional areas. How do you know what the difference is between a really good provider or deliverer of that service and an okay one?
Sure. And if we take product as an example, I think early next year, assuming funding goes well and all the rest of it, then that'd be one key area for us to hire. Product's interesting just because someone once described it to me as what business analysts should have been always. So business analysts were always quite constrained, whereas the product owner has quite a broad remit themselves to really make the product better for everybody. And so they really have to have a broad array of interests. They have to understand it in a vastly more sort of three-dimensional view almost than people have historically looked at things in business analysis. If you take complaints as an example, arguably not a product, a discrete process, but still an important process that a product owner would have within their remit. Yeah. Within financial services, that's quite heavily regulated.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of business and regulatory drivers around how that works. And the average person would be just looking at the process, maybe how they can make some efficiencies, where are key sort of costs at the moment, how we do that.
Okay.
The really good ones, though, are saying to me, actually, the regulator, the FCA or the Ombudsman have been telling us that root cause analysis, which is a discrete regulatory part of the complaints process, has been done in very shallow manner by many financial organisations. And I want to do this in a far better way. By the way, at the same time, I know that lots of the banks fail getting their statutory notices out on time because their systems are so poor, the volumes. And we, as a startup, we can just build that into the systems at the beginning. Oh, and by the way, all of this together means that we can actually market ourselves as someone who actively takes a real interest in complaints to better ourselves and hopefully gain more customers. So they're looking at it from all different angles, the business drivers, they're looking at the regulatory aspects. And that person who looks at it, all those will come up, in my experience, with a far better product than someone who is quite siloed and just looks at the processes within their product.
Okay, so rather than just looking at the processes, the how of things, go a bit deeper and look at the why, which the regulator will call root cause analysis, but for everybody else just means, getting back to the core reasons why that problem occurs, and not just fixing it, but actually understanding how that can benefit the business and learn from it, which takes some bravery, doesn't it? You've got to have some courage as a product owner to really hold your mistakes, your complaints close to you so that you can extract the benefit out of it. Do you see many people with that kind of mindset? That sounds unusual to me.
Not as many as we'd like. Even back in the old days, as when we're doing old waterfall style programs, I find really, really good, high quality BAs who really understood the product inside out was quite difficult. Finding them who then have the autonomy or the willingness to get out there and change things for the better themselves can be quite tough. But they are out there, and when you do find them, you keep hold of them.
All right, so we know what we're looking for. They're going to trog in as an interviewer. Let's say I'm one. I think I've got the product cojones to come and sit in front of you. How do you work out who's a great one and who's not? We know what we're looking for, but what process do you go through to know that this is one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just mentioned there's the process, the sort of how does it get done, and before they even get to the interview part, if the CV is just about process, then they may be very good, but they're obviously quite junior, so they won't even make it to the interview stage at the first place. So they at least need to be talking about the results and what they have performed and how they made the organisation better. Very few people put on, to your point, the why and the drivers, and even those that do, it's quite difficult to get it all down in writing in a short CV because it can be quite in depth. So when they get to interview, what I'm really taking is they've shown me these results. Now I need to convince myself that they were responsible for those results, that they were the architect of that results. And it goes back to what I was saying is, do they really understand? Can they talk around the drivers of the business, how it interacts with other areas?
Yeah.
Can they talk confidently around that? And then, so I don't care about the process. I'm not going to do the process day to day, hopefully. And I'm hiring them to sort out the process. I really want to understand that, how they're going to work as part of the bigger picture.
Okay, fine. So once again, it's not so much about the how, it's about the why. That's what you're looking for, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
If they understand why they're doing this process, there's some output language there, there's some results language there, some benefits to the business rather than some process, then that's an indicator that person should definitely be sat in front of you for an interview.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So we're at the interview now. We're sat in front of you. We've cleared the first hurdles. I've got a bit of why language and some benefits. What are the sort of traps that I might fall into at interview, and what are the tips that you've got for me to avoid them if I want to be someone who's on your senior team?
So I think the word you just mentioned is the key element, is team.
Yeah.
So I think interview stage is naturally about you, and you become quite introspective and talk about yourself. But we want someone who's going to come and join our team. We succeed. It's a bit of a cliche, but we succeed together. And we will. I certainly don't succeed on my own. I day to day, I don't do any processes. I don't do the process design, or very little of it. And so I will succeed when the people I work with succeed. And so getting that empathy, that thinking about the rest of the team, talking about the rest of the team, how you might contribute, elevates you from the people who solely talk around themselves. And I think the other thing is, as you mentioned, it's quite hard to find really good product owners. And the ones who are good are quite passionate. So again, once you're talking about yourself, you become quite introspective. You can become quite easily talk about, it's quite a bit of a monologue around yourself, quite monotonous or monotone. We really want to see a bit of passion from you as well. We want to see your personality. Not quite so much now in the days of COVID where we work at home, but historically I spend more time in the office than I did with friends and family. And I want to be with someone who is going to be part of the team and who is passionate and wants us to succeed. And I will get on with day to day, because we'll spend a lot of time together. So that sort of allowing yourself to open up within the interview and be yourself and be passionate and authentic, I think is quite important, and very easy not to allow to come out in an interview stage.
You're not the first C-suite executive we've had who said exactly that. They're desperate to see the real you. And I think that's partly because at a senior level, it's not authentic to put on a corporate front. It does weird people out at board level if there's someone there that is a different kind of person underneath it all. And so from just a working relationship perspective, it's just odd. But also, if they know that the person they're seeing on a day-to-day basis in the office is exactly the same person who's outside, with their family, they don't have a corporate switch they flick. I think that goes to trust a little bit, which at a very senior level, which is all the people who work for you, you need that, don't you? You can't be wondering about what kind of version of themselves they're going to bring to the office today. And that sort of, just have one version of yourself and let that be the person at home, in the office, and all the time. It's got to be simpler for them if they trusted that was allowed in the office. So how do you create that where it's okay to be yourself? Because most people at work, they've got to be a sort of a work version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it differs in industry as well. If you're a consultant going into another company, then you may have to have a slightly different persona. It's not quite as easy to be yourself. But I think one of the difficult things for the senior management team, as you get promoted and you become more hands-off, there has to be an element of trust. And if you're not trusting people, you get quite jittery. So one of the things is we're not going to micromanage you. We're not going to be there telling you exactly what you have to do and what you have to say. We're not a large corporate where you have to turn up in a suit every day. And so to enable that relationship and that environment where people can be themselves, it really is about, firstly, the senior managers have to step back a little bit and allow people to grow into the role and allow them to be themselves. So if you're constantly overbearing, then people won't be themselves anyway. But on the other side, then people have to take that opportunity. As with all things in life, you have an opportunity, you have to take it and do what you can with it. So I think it's a bit of a two-way sort of relationship.
Okay. Now, Alistair, for everyone who's listening, Alistair didn't just roll in today to do this. Alistair and I have spoken before. In fact, I know you because of a program I run. And one of the things I know about you, which other people won't know yet, is that Your career hitherto, your recent corporate career, was all in the military. Talk to us a little bit about, because I'm always fascinated by this, the contrast between being a senior officer in the military and being a senior corporate executive, albeit in a startup environment rather than a sort of $1 billion corporate, whether there are any parallels there or whether there are any stark differences there, and how you make that transition.
Yeah. So I was actually a non-commissioned officer. I didn't join the army as an officer. So I have quite a different background in some ways to your previous guest who I watched the interview earlier. Although, interestingly, and you won't know this because it's not on my LinkedIn, just because I just put British Army. Yeah. I was actually in the Royal Signals, the same corps as Rob, although I don't know him. Yeah. So I joined as an electronic warfare operator. So working in relatively small teams, doing quite a specialised role, where you have to be able to think for yourself, you have to be fairly autonomous and get on and do things. And one of the contrasts I think I've seen is the army puts on a lot of responsibility very early, which you often don't find in some corporates. Some you do, you're in front office in investment banking doing M&A, whilst they talk about, bag handlers and all of it, which may be an element of it. They're expected to get on and solve problems constantly from day one. Yeah. Whereas in other areas of the bank, that may not be true. So for example, you join the army, you become an electronic warfare operator. It's about 1.5 years training. I learned Russian, I learned Serbo-Croat, as well as technical elements of antennas and propagation. And then you get on with it, and you're expected to run in small teams and take decisions pretty early on. And I think sometimes when I look in the banks I've worked at, some of the junior middle managers haven't had that and are certainly experiencing responsibility for the first time, and they already might be 5-10 years into the career. And I think it's quite hard for people. So again, it goes back to that point around taking the gas, or not micromanaging, stepping away from people, allowing them to succeed, but also, putting clear goals and expecting them to deliver. So that was one of the larger differences I found. I think one of the other differences I found is that the army's had hundreds of years of trying to get people to become mission orientated, goal orientated, as you say here. Everything they do is around that. They're getting large groups of disparate people together to come up with a common goal. And we could talk for hours, which we won't obviously, but around how they do that, because there's lots of small and large things they do. Everything from uniforms, medals, getting that buy-in, the regimental system, to that family orientation. And that's quite hard again in some of the civilian companies. So if your job is to turn the wheel a bit to make a bit more money so your MD can get his next Ferrari, it's quite hard to get buy-in from the staff.
Yeah,
it's quite hard. But, the military has that. But, one of the reasons I've joined Zedos is we have a very clear goal of making life better, not just for the advertising industry themselves, but actually for consumers. We're proactive in how we want to make things better. And so it's a large part of what we do is really building that community and getting people to buy into a better future.
I think you're right. The language I hear, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the military around the world, actually, it's not peculiar to the British military. They talk about brothers and sisters, And in corporate life, we just don't have that. We have colleagues, we might even have close friends, but brothers and sisters, that's a family word. And you use the word family. And I'm not certain we get that in corporate life very much. But you think at Zedos you have that, you can emulate that a bit because you have a common goal, a common mission that everyone's facing towards. And it's not about the chairman's next Ferrari. It's about democratizing online advertising.
I think we're certainly trying to get there. I mean, arguably, you don't need quite the same standard. We're not going to ask anyone to go out, dig a hole and sit in it for a week whilst they're getting shot at. So that level of discomfort and hardship isn't going to be there. So you don't need quite that level of bonding to get through things. But certainly, if you want buy-in, if you want people to be passionate, if you want people to put in the extra mile, then that common goal helps. And having a common goal that isn't just for marketing purposes as well, make sure it's real.
All right. So look, you learned Russian, you learned Serbo-Croat. I presume that weren't because you were based in Basingstoke. You probably slept around the planet by the sounds of it. International, cultural, regional differences. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've within banking as opposed to military. I did work and I was in Bosnia and stuff with the army. But within banking, I've been lucky enough to run teams in Poland, Romania, India, Singapore, and the thing that shines through is I've been, prior to this role, I have a number of interviews, and the cultural piece for international companies comes up quite a bit. And it's interesting because people seem to think that culture is almost a be all and end all, that they've confused market conditions with culture, and they think that it's this huge blocker to being able to work abroad or makes huge fundamental differences. My experience is that whilst culture does impact the business and you have to take it into consideration, at the end of the day, people are people. You get the basics right. People want to be valued, they want the opportunity to succeed, and they want to be thought of well and look after the families. That's pretty much universal. And if you as a company are working towards that, then the cultural element is quite frankly a bit of a sideshow.
Okay. So it's less about culture, it's more about the fundamentals of being a human, which are ubiquitous globally, I hope. I've not yet met a human being I thought was from a different planet. All right. So a quick summary from me then. If you're going to be someone who's working in fast growth, fintech, ad tech, as a head of products, finance, tech ops, legal, and end up working for you as the COO, then what you're looking for is less about whether or not they can do their job on a day-to-day basis, because that's just a how question. And quite frankly, they wouldn't be in front of you for an interview if they didn't know how to do their job. It's about, do they understand the why? Do they understand the why because that makes them better at doing their job? Do they understand the why because there's a common purpose there that is resonant with perhaps how high-performing teams work? And if they've got that why, then you're going to be allowed to get on and do your COO piece rather than get bogged down in some of the tactical things. And for that to work that means that there's a little bit of them helping you to help them. It's sort of a circular. I'm trying to avoid the word collaborative because that's a bit too junior a word for this, but there's a sort of a higher purpose than just doing the work. It's about raising everybody up. Kind of sounding like Oprah here. Help me out here, Alistair. What?
So I think at the end of the day, people don't. If my leadership team take more out of me than they put into me, then I cease to function effectively, and therefore that's not good for any of us.
Empathy, that was the word I was desperately trying to find. Empathy, it's about being able to see the world through your team's eyes so that you can contribute to it in a constructive and positive way. Final words from you then before we wrap this up.
Sure. I mean, as I say, in my world really of helping CEOs of startups, anything up to Series A, really allowing those CEOs to have the time and the tools to get their job done. I really want to work with and enjoy working with people who are also passionate, who are team players, and really want to understand what we're doing and move it forward.
Alistair, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing those thoughts from the COO's chair about what it takes to get hired as a head of product or finance or legal or tech or ops and work for someone like you, particularly in fast growth fintech, ad tech startups, which I know you have quite a bit of experience and success in. We wish Zedos well. I think it's a brilliant concept, and I can't wait to see that step change in the entire market, which I know Zedos is really pushing forward. If people want to check Zedos out, I presume you've got a website, have you? Zedos.com or something like that?
Zedos.com, yeah. We also got quite a heavy presence on LinkedIn, actually. So we advertise, we put little nuggets of advertising wisdom out every day. So cool. You can check us out on both.
Zedos. Alistair, thank you so much. Look forward to speaking to you on the next podcast, everyone. Take care.
Thanks very much. Bye.